Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about abortion. And, yeah, this is going to be fun. I feel compelled to talk about this subject because it's just something that is very important to me. And, it's a super controversial thing that everybody has an opinion on, and there are people who get really mad on both sides of the subject. There is a heated debate. And there has been a heated debate over where the line should be drawn, where you're allowed to end the life of a potential human being. My goal today is to approach this subject from a non-emotional, non-moral, non-judgmental, just lay out the situation as it is and not how people would want to see it. So that hopefully some of you who aren't necessarily brainwashed by either side of the debate, can make a decision. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, the arguments I'm laying forth here are anti-abortion, 100%, with very few exceptions. Because if you lay out it from a factual standpoint, there is no argument for killing a child. There are selfish reasons for killing a child. There are reasons of convenience for killing a child. You can come up with whatever definitions that you want to support those things that make life better for you. But at the end of the day, there is no justification for abortion except in extremely rare cases. So we'll get to that later. I do talk about one exception later on. But I'm just telling you now, those of you who are just captured by the abortion thing, you're not going to like this video. Go ahead and click off of it now. But if you're open-minded and you want to hear some actual things that are real and aren't just an agenda that allows people to avoid the consequences of their actions, continue listening. Now, the line that people are trying to draw where it becomes reasonable to end the life of a future human being doesn't matter. There is no line, really. The reality is that as soon as an egg is fertilized, and assuming that the woman is healthy and that the embryo is viable, it attaches properly, and the woman has a normal pregnancy. Obviously, there are a million different things that can come in to interrupt that process naturally without humans coming in and doing anything. Obviously, there are exceptions to everything. But realistically, as soon as the egg is fertilized, if that process continues naturally with no external forces interrupting that process, that will develop into a full human being who could potentially have many, many decades of life. Okay? And anytime that you decide that you're going to step into that process because you don't want to have to deal with it or whatever reason that you have, it doesn't really matter the reason. I'm here to state the facts. The facts are that an embryo will develop into a fetus, and a fetus will develop into a small baby, which will develop into a small child, which will develop into a teenager, and then an adult who will become an old person and eventually die. There are many decades of life that will happen as the result of an egg being fertilized by a sperm. And assuming nothing gets in the way of that, and we've seen it over the course of many thousands of years, that will develop into a human being. Now, you can play semantic games to try to say that, well, up to this point, it's only this or it's only that. But the reality of the process is fertilized egg becomes an embryo, becomes a fetus, becomes whatever else it is, whatever other steps along the way, it's still going to be a human being. So, that's not a moral statement or a religious statement or an anything statement. It's just a statement of fact. That is how human reproduction works. Now, the thing that bothers me, and this might dip into the morality side of things a little bit, but when I think about it that way, I think about the fact that this is a potential person. This is somebody who, more likely than not, especially in our modern culture with our modern science, is going to develop into a person that will have many decades of life ahead of them. That person might have a loving family. It might be a loving father or a loving mother. It might be a mentor to somebody, mentor to future generations, who is able to take the wisdom and experience that they gain over the course of their lifetime and, impart that to people who can then go on to use that knowledge. And the thought for me is that it doesn't matter whether, it's inconvenient to you as a person, as a father or as a mother or whatever it is. The reality of the situation is that once you step in and interrupt that process, the potential for that life is completely just snuffed out. Every positive thing that might have happened from that person being born into the world and having a chance to go out there and do something with their life is completely lost, not because that person failed, but because you failed. Because you couldn't be bothered to deal with the consequences of the actions that you chose to take. Okay? Now, obviously there are exceptions to that entire situation. There is no 100% everything is this or everything is that. I will never say that. But I will say that a life is a life. And regardless of where you choose to end it, whether it's in the womb, whether it's a pill you take to kill the baby, or after the baby is born, or, the baby's 5 years old and you've just decided you don't want to deal with it anymore, that doesn't really matter. I mean, the problem that I end up having with this whole debate that we have is that we will severely punish parents who, abuse their little babies or abuse their little children. Somehow, because we can see a child, that somehow makes it different for us. And we say, oh, no, you can't do that. We're going to put you in jail. Or, maybe in some places you're going to get the death penalty because you're this horrible person. How could you do this to your child? But then we look at a fetus who is basically just a less developed version of that same thing, and we somehow justify it because you can't see the cute little baby anymore. And that's the problem that I have with both sides of the argument. You can't apply a religious thing to an argument and expect a rational person to necessarily listen to that, because if they don't believe the same thing that you do, then your argument doesn't matter. But at the same time, it's hard to not look at a person who is doing that and who is engaging in this activity and not see them as just, acting out of pure selfishness. They don't want to deal with the responsibility that comes with having a child. And we as a society also just don't want to deal with the responsibility that comes with allowing or forcing, people to have these children and then put them in some kind of adoption situation, right? That requires us to actually put some time and effort into something. Now, there are some exceptions to where this particular situation might be a reasonable option. And as far as I'm concerned, the only reasonable exception is when forcing that child to be born would cause the child to have a life that is unlivable. So, for example, it has some kind of horrible deformity that would make it impossible for that child to have any kind of quality of life at all. Or forcing that child to be born would put it in the position where it's just going to have a lifelong, excruciating pain for however long it ends up living. That is, as far as I'm concerned, is the only reasonable path to an abortion of any kind. Now, I know that the R word is going to be thrown about by some people. And while I do sympathize that, it's like some people will try to argue that it's forcing the victim to be victimized twice by forcing them to have the baby. But I'm sorry, I can't understand that argument, because it's not the baby's fault that this bad thing happened. And you're punishing the baby and you're snuffing out a potential life because it's going to hurt the mother more. Well, I know, I understand, I get it, but at the same time, two wrongs don't make a right, and killing the baby, I don't know. I personally just can't agree with that. I can't find any logical justification other than, we're going to say that the mother is able to get rid of the child because it's going to cause her continuing pain. And I'm like, well, she can choose to do that. I don't think that we as a society should be advocating that. It's a personal opinion. I think it's logically sound, but it's a gray area, and that's going to be one of those places where we're going to constantly argue about it. But as far as the rest of it, birth control is a great thing, and, you may want to go out and enjoy sexual activity and do those things, and that's fine, but you need to understand that there's still a risk that those things aren't going to work, and you may end up getting pregnant, or you may end up impregnating somebody, and, there might be a child that comes along from that. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't see any logical justification for us as a society saying that it's okay for people to say, well, you know what, I still want to have sex, but I don't want to have to live with the potential consequences of that. So we should just allow the ending of a human life because it's inconvenient for us. Like, that's not a religious statement. That's not anything other than just a statement of fact. I mean, that's all it is. It is a human being that will grow into, it's a human that will grow into a full-size adult at some point, as long as we don't step in and mess with it, or nature. And if nature comes in and does it, well, that's nature. But if we're choosing to do that, that's out of pure selfishness, and there's just really no justification for that. You know, it is what it is. And if you don't want to have to deal with that situation in the first place, there is a 100% method of preventing that from ever happening to you. It's called not having sex. I know that's an unpopular answer, and, you know, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that you should not have sex, because, you know, I would be a hypocrite if I said that. I don't believe in you have to be married before you have sex or any of that stuff. I'm just saying that there is a risk. It's like gambling. You go out and you roll the dice, and you might get a disease, or you might impregnate somebody, or any number of different things that could happen because you chose to engage in that activity. My argument here is that if you're going to engage in that activity, the rule should be that you're stuck with the consequences of that. You don't get to kill a child because you don't like that you got unlucky and it happened to you. And if you don't want that to ever happen to you, don't have sex. You can't have a baby if you don't have sex. So you have to pick one. You either have sex and maybe you end up stuck with a kid, and, you know, I advocate that if you don't want to have a kid, you have the kid and then you put them up for adoption. That's the reasonable course of action as far as I'm concerned. Anything else outside of that, that's just everybody being lazy and selfish. Like, I understand there's a bunch of different arguments. Oh, well, if you're stuck with the kid, you're not going to love him and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. So don't keep the kid. Find a loving family for him to be with, because there's plenty of people out there without kids who want kids who will take care of that kid. We can change the adoption process in this country and make it much easier for people to get kids, which is a massive solution to that problem. But all that said, regardless, my argument here is that unless you're going to accept the fact that all you're doing is being selfish by killing the baby, there is no, like, that's the only interpretation that is really factually valid here. There is no logical, factual, valid reason to end a baby's life unless it's that one exception that I said where, you know, that baby is going to suffer horribly if we allow the birth to continue. That's the only reason. Everything else is some kind of a form of selfishness. Some more selfish than others, but it's all selfishness. So that's what I want to say. There's no way to make this argument in a way where everybody's going to understand it. This video is going to get a lot of hate, and it's going to get a lot of, I don't know, it depends on the algorithm even puts it in front of people. But this video, from the people who watch it, it's going to provoke a very strong response, and I'm expecting to get a lot of hate and a lot of disagreement, because, you know, nobody wants to be told that they're being a bad person by participating in this thing that makes their life easier. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. You're choosing yourself over someone else's potential life. That's it. There is no other interpretation of it. You can try to twist yourself into an interpretation of it that makes you feel better, but that is what it is. You're killing a baby because you don't want to have to be bothered with it. End of story. And I'm sorry. So, okay. I guess that's it for that. Like and subscribe if you agree with my point of view. Leave a comment if you disagree with my point of view. Let the games begin. I'll see you for the next one.